I think I didn't do anything wrong. I just made a joke about my husband in front of friends. People laugh about their partners all the time, right? But now I'm sitting alone with divorce papers on my table, wondering how one harmless comment could ruin everything. Honestly, I still don't see what the big deal was. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The wine was flowing perfectly that Friday night, and I had everything arranged just right in our 3-bedroom suburban home. The kitchen island was loaded with appetizers, the living room buzzed with conversation, and I felt like the perfect hostess. Cassidy Morrow, my best friend from the HR department, was laughing at something I'd said, while 3 other couples mingled around our space. This was exactly the kind of evening I lived for, being the center of attention, the one everyone wanted to be around. Julian was in the kitchen, quietly refilling drinks and checking on the food. At 35, my husband had this earnest way about him that I found increasingly, well, let's just say it wasn't exactly impressive to my friends. He worked as a mid-level office manager, always so serious about everything, always trying so hard to please everyone. Sometimes I wondered what I'd seen in him when we got married 9 years ago. "Leo, your husband is such a saint," Cassidy said, watching Julian carefully arrange cheese on a platter. "Look at him taking care of everyone." That's when it happened. The comment just slipped out, fueled by wine and the desire to get a laugh from my audience. "Oh, Julian's always been good with his hands," I said with a smirk, then lowered my voice just enough to seem conspiratorial while still being heard. "It's really the only area where his size works in his favor." The room went quiet for a split second before nervous laughter rippled through the group. I felt that familiar rush of being the center of attention, of saying something shocking that got a reaction. Cassidy looked uncomfortable, but she was still smiling. The other wives exchanged glances, some amused, others clearly awkward. But when I looked toward the kitchen, Julian had gone completely still. The wine bottle in his hand trembled slightly, and his face had drained of color. Our eyes met across the room, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just hurt, but a kind of devastation that made my stomach clench. "Julian, honey, you know I'm just kidding around," I called out, trying to laugh it off. But he was already setting down the bottle and walking toward the hallway. "I need some air," he said quietly, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. "Julian, come on. Don't be so sensitive," I said, but the front door was already closing behind him. The party continued, but the energy had shifted. People kept glancing toward the door, and conversations felt forced. I spent the rest of the evening assuring everyone that Julian was fine, that he just needed space, that he'd be back soon. "You know how men can be," I kept saying. "They can't take a joke." But Julian didn't come back that night. He didn't answer his phone or respond to my texts. When I woke up Saturday morning, I found a voicemail from his mother, Martha. "Leocadia, I heard what happened at your party last night. I don't know what you were thinking, but my son doesn't deserve to be humiliated in his own home. You need to figure out what kind of wife you want to be." I deleted the message, annoyed. Of course Martha had heard. She had friends everywhere in our social circle. But honestly, what was the big deal? Everyone makes jokes about their spouses. It's not like I'd said anything that wasn't true. By Monday morning, I was frustrated and looking for support. Julian had finally come home Sunday evening, but he'd barely spoken to me, sleeping in the guest room and leaving early for work. I needed my friends to remind me that I wasn't crazy, that his reaction was completely overblown. I found Cassidy in the office break room and immediately launched into my complaints. "I can't believe Julian is still being so dramatic about Friday," I said, pouring coffee with more force than necessary. "It was obviously a joke." Everyone laughed. Cassidy stirred her tea slowly, not meeting my eyes. "Leo, I mean, It was pretty harsh, and in front of everyone. Oh, come on. You've complained about David snoring plenty of times. How is this different? Because I don't mock his, personal stuff in public. I felt a flash of irritation. Since when are you so sensitive? You laughed. I was uncomfortable. We all were. That afternoon, I started a group chat with 3 of my closest friends, including Cassidy. I needed to vent, to get this frustration out of my system. The messages started innocently enough, complaining about Julian's sensitivity, his tendency to overreact to things. But as the conversation continued, I found myself getting more and more detailed about our problems. He's been sleeping in the guest room for 3 days, over a joke. Honestly, sometimes I wonder why I married someone so insecure. Like, if you can't laugh at yourself, what's the point? The worst part is how he just shuts down instead of talking about it. So passive-aggressive. Cassidy's responses grew shorter and less supportive as the day went on. By evening, she'd stopped responding altogether, but I kept typing, fueled by wine and frustration when I got home. I swear, sometimes I think Julian would be happier with someone as boring as he is, someone who thinks missionary position twice a month is exciting. At least Elliot knows how to make a woman feel appreciated. I'd mentioned Elliot Green before to my friends. He was an IT consultant I'd been working with on some marketing campaigns. 34, confident, funny. The kind of man who knew how to flirt, who made me feel attractive and interesting. We'd grabbed drinks after work a few times, and yes, maybe things had progressed beyond professional, but it wasn't serious. Just harmless fun with someone who actually appreciated me. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Julian that made my blood run cold. I've seen your messages, Leo, all of them. I'm staying at the downtown hotel for a while. We'll talk when I'm ready. My hands shook as I scrolled through the group chat, seeing my words through his eyes. Cassidy must have shown him, or maybe one of the others had. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. These were supposed to be my friends, my support system. How dare they share private conversations? I called Cassidy immediately. How could you show Julian my messages? Those were private. Leo, I didn't show him anything, but Sarah's husband works with Julian, and she felt like he should know. Know what? That his wife needs to vent sometimes? That I have friends I can talk to? That you're having an affair and publicly humiliating him. The words hung in the air between us. It's not an affair. Elliot and I are just friends, and Julian is being ridiculously sensitive about everything else. Leo, listen to yourself. You mocked his masculinity in front of a room full of people, then spent 2 days trashing him in our group chat and bragging about another man. How is that okay? I hung up on her. She was supposed to be my best friend, and instead she was taking Julian's side like everyone else. That evening, my mother Sophie called. Honey, Julian's mother called me. She's very upset. What's going on? I gave her the sanitized version, that Julian was overreacting to a harmless joke, that his mother was being dramatic, that my friends were betraying my confidence. But even as I spoke, I could hear the doubt in my mother's voice. Maybe you should apologize, she said gently. Even if you didn't mean to hurt him, it sounds like you did. Why should I apologize for Julian being too sensitive to handle normal married couple teasing? But that night, alone in our king-sized bed, I couldn't shake the image of Julian's face when he'd seen those messages, the hurt in his eyes when I'd made that joke at the party. Maybe I had gone a little far. Maybe I could smooth things over, make him understand that I hadn't meant anything by it. I texted him, Julian, can we please talk? I miss you. Joel is asking where you are. His response came an hour later. I'll pick up Joel for dinner Thursday. We can talk then. I met Elliot at our usual cafe Wednesday afternoon, needing someone who would understand my side of things. He was waiting in our corner booth, looking as attractive as always in his fitted button-down and dark jeans. When he smiled at me, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement, the feeling Julian hadn't given me in years. You look stressed, Elliot said, as I slid into the booth across from him. Julian found out about our friendship, and he's being completely unreasonable about some stupid joke I made at a party. Elliot's expression shifted slightly. What kind of joke? I waved my hand dismissively. Just typical married couple stuff. But he's acting like I committed some terrible crime. He moved out, Elliot, over a joke and some private messages between friends. Leo... Elliot leaned back in his seat. Maybe we should cool things down for a while. If your husband is suspicious of what? We're just friends who happen to have good chemistry. Come on, we both know it's more than that. I felt a spike of panic. Elliot was supposed to be my escape, my validation that I was still desirable and interesting. Are you abandoning me too? I'm not abandoning anyone, but I don't want to be the reason your marriage falls apart. My marriage is falling apart because Julian can't handle being married to someone with a personality. That has nothing to do with you. But even as I said it, I could see Elliot pulling away. The easy flirtation was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. That evening, Joel asked me where Daddy was sleeping. Daddy's just staying somewhere else for a few days, sweetie. He'll be back soon. But Joel, 8 years old and perceptive, wasn't satisfied. Is it because you were mean to him at the party? My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I heard you say something that made him sad and then he left. I knelt down to Joel's level, forcing a smile. Mommy and Daddy just had a little disagreement. It's nothing for you to worry about. But that night, I got a call from Martha. Leocadia, I want to be very clear about something. Joel will not be staying at your house unsupervised until this situation is resolved. Excuse me? He's my son. He's my grandson, and I won't have him exposed to whatever drama you've created. Julian told me about your friend, and about how you've been talking about him to anyone who will listen. Julian is exaggerating everything, and my personal life is none of your business. It became my business when you decided to humiliate my son publicly and then broadcast your infidelity to half the town. I hung up on her, shaking with rage. Everyone was against me, twisting everything I'd said and done into something ugly. I was the victim here, the wife whose husband couldn't take a joke, whose friends betrayed her confidence, whose mother-in-law interfered in her marriage. Thursday evening, Julian came to pick up Joel for dinner. He looked tired, older somehow, but there was a resolve in his posture that I hadn't seen before. We need to talk, I said as Joel ran to get his jacket. Yes, we do. His voice was steady, formal. I've retained a lawyer, Leo. The words hit me like a slap. A lawyer? Julian, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? Am I? You publicly humiliated me, then spent days telling our friends how inadequate I am as a husband while bragging about your affair? What part of that should I find acceptable? It's not an affair, and I was venting to friends. People do that. People don't do that, Leo. People don't mock their spouse's masculinity for entertainment, then broadcast their marriage problems while cheating. I'm not cheating. Julian looked at me with something that might have been sadness. I have bank statements showing dinners charged to your card on nights you claim to be working late. I have text messages where you explicitly compare me to another man. What would you call it? I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Julian, please, can't we work this out? Go to counseling or something? I tried to work it out for years, Leo. Every time you dismissed my feelings, every time you made me feel small, every time you acted like my emotions didn't matter. This isn't about one joke or one affair. This is about who you are and how you treat people. Joel came running back with his jacket, and Julian's entire demeanor shifted, becoming warm and gentle as he helped our son get ready. I'll have him back by 8, Julian said, not looking at me. As I watched them drive away, I felt a cold certainty settling in my chest. This wasn't going to blow over. Julian wasn't going to forgive and forget like he always had before. For the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I might actually lose everything. By the following week, The isolation was becoming impossible to ignore. My usual lunch group had stopped, including me in their plans. The group chat that had caused so much trouble had gone silent. Even casual acquaintances at work seemed to be avoiding me. I cornered Cassidy in the office break room Tuesday morning, determined to salvage at least one friendship. Cass, this is getting ridiculous. How long are you going to punish me for having normal marriage problems? She looked up from her coffee with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment mixed with something that looked like disgust. Normal marriage problems? Leo, do you hear yourself? You humiliated Julian in front of everyone, then spent days trashing him while bragging about sleeping with another man. That's not normal anything. I never said I was sleeping with Elliot. You didn't have to. It was obvious to everyone. I felt my face flush. So what if I was? Julian and I have been having problems for years. He's boring, he's passive, he doesn't appreciate me. Maybe I deserve to feel wanted by someone. Then get divorced. Don't cheat and publicly humiliate him while pretending to be a devoted wife. I wasn't pretending anything. And I can't believe you're taking his side over mine. I thought you were my friend. Cassidy set down her mug and looked at me directly. I was your friend, but friends don't ask you to cover for their affairs. Friends don't put you in the position of watching them destroy a good man for entertainment. Julian never did anything to you except love you and try to make you happy. Julian is not a good man. He's weak and boring and— Stop! Cassidy's voice was sharp. Just stop. Listen to yourself, Leo. You're so busy justifying your behavior that you can't see how cruel you've become. She walked out of the break room, leaving me standing alone with my coffee growing cold. That afternoon, I tried calling my other friends from the group chat. Sarah's call went straight to voicemail. Michelle answered, but claimed she was busy and couldn't talk. By evening, I was desperate enough to reach out to people I barely knew, trying to find someone who would validate my side of the story. My mother called that night, her voice careful and sad. Honey, I think you should consider apologizing to Julian. Really apologizing. For what? For having friends? For making one joke that he took the wrong way? For hurting him? For betraying your marriage? For putting Joel in the middle of this mess? I didn't put Joel in the middle of anything. Julian is the one who moved out, who's involving lawyers, who's turning everyone against me. Leo. Sophie's voice was gentle but firm. I love you, but you're not the victim here. You made choices that hurt your family. Take responsibility for them. I hung up on my own mother, fury and desperation warring in my chest. Everyone had turned against me. Everyone was acting like I was some kind of monster instead of a woman who'd made a few mistakes, who'd been pushed to her breaking point by an unsatisfying marriage. Friday morning, I found an email in my inbox that made my hands shake. From Davidson, Klein and Associates Re, Dissolution of Marriage, Hartwell v. Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, please be advised that our client, Julian Hartwell, is filing for dissolution of marriage. He is seeking primary custody of the minor child and an equitable distribution of marital assets. Please retain counsel at your earliest convenience. Sincerely, Robert Klein, Esq. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. Primary custody. Julian wanted to take Joel away from me. The man who couldn't handle a simple joke now thought he could steal my son. I called Julian immediately, not caring that I was at work, not caring who might overhear. How dare you try to take Joel from me? Leo, I'm not trying to take him from you. I'm trying to protect him from the chaos you've created. What chaos? I made one joke and had coffee with a friend. That doesn't make me an unfit mother. It wasn't one joke, and it wasn't just coffee. And it's not just about what you did. It's about how you've handled it since. You've shown no remorse, no accountability, no concern for how your actions affect Joel or anyone else. I don't need to show remorse for Julian being too sensitive to handle normal marriage dynamics. There was a long pause. When Julian spoke again, his voice was tired but resolved. I'm done trying to explain this to you, Leo. I'll see you in court. The line went dead, and I sat staring at my phone, finally beginning to understand that this was real. Julian wasn't coming back. My friends weren't going to forgive me. My family was questioning my choices. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, I might actually be wrong. The attorney's office felt cold and impersonal, all glass and steel and expensive furniture that made me feel small. I'd hired Rebecca Walsh after a frantic weekend of research and phone calls, choosing her mainly because she'd assured me that mothers usually got primary custody and that Julian's case was probably just posturing. "Tell me about the incident that started all this," Rebecca said, her pen poised over a legal pad. I gave her the sanitized version, that I'd made a harmless joke at a party that Julian had blown out of proportion, that he was using it as an excuse to divorce me and take our son. "What exactly did you say?" I shifted in my chair. "Just something about his size. Typical married couple teasing." "In front of other people?" "A few friends, but everyone laughed. It wasn't mean-spirited." Rebecca made a note. "And there are allegations of an extramarital relationship?" "Julian is exaggerating a friendship with a colleague. We had coffee a few times, maybe dinner once or twice. Nothing serious." "Were you intimate with this colleague?" I hesitated. Define intimate. Rebecca looked up from her notes, and I could see her reassessing me. "Ms. Hartwell, I need you to be completely honest with me if I'm going to represent you effectively." "Fine. Yes, we were involved. But it wasn't serious, and it's not relevant to my ability to be a mother. It's relevant to the court's assessment of your character and judgment. What about these group messages I'm seeing referenced in their filing?" My stomach clenched. I vented to friends about my marriage problems. That's what friends are for. "According to their evidence summary, you made disparaging comments about your husband's sexual performance and compared him unfavorably to your affair partner, in writing, to multiple people." I was frustrated. I was looking for support from my friends. Rebecca set down her pen. "Ms. Hartwell, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your husband's legal team has a strong case. They have evidence of public humiliation, infidelity, and what could be characterized as a pattern of emotional abuse. Unless you're prepared to show genuine remorse and make significant changes, your chances of retaining primary custody are slim." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emotional abuse? I made one joke. One public joke, followed by extensive private communications detailing your contempt for your husband, combined with an extramarital affair. The court will see this as a pattern of behavior that could be harmful to your child's emotional development. I left the attorney's office in a daze. This couldn't be happening. I wasn't an abuser. I was just a woman who'd been pushed too far by an unsatisfying marriage. Julian was the one breaking up our family over hurt feelings. That evening, Joel came to stay with me for what might be one of our last regular visits. He was quieter than usual, picking at his dinner and avoiding eye contact. "Joel, sweetheart, you know Mommy loves you very much, right?" He nodded, but didn't look up from his plate. "And you know that whatever happens with Daddy and me, it's not your fault? Daddy said you might have to live in different houses for a while." My heart clenched. "Would that be okay with you?" Joel finally looked at me, his 8-year-old eyes too serious for his age. "I just want everyone to stop being sad and angry all the time." That night, after Joel was asleep, my mother came over. She sat at my kitchen table looking older than I remembered, her hands folded carefully in front of her. "Leo, I need you to listen to me. Really listen." "Mom, not you too. I can't handle everyone being against me right now." "I'm not against you. I'm trying to save you from yourself." Sophie's voice was gentle, but firm. "You're about to lose your son and your marriage, and instead of taking responsibility, you're still blaming everyone else." I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just trying to understand how one stupid joke turned into this nightmare. It wasn't one joke, honey. It was years of taking Julian for granted, of making him feel small, of treating your marriage like it was disposable. The joke was just the final straw. I felt tears starting to build behind my eyes. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people. And instead of acknowledging that and trying to make amends, you've spent weeks justifying your behavior and making it worse. So, what am I supposed to do? Grovel? Pretend that Julian is perfect and I'm some kind of monster? You're supposed to take responsibility for your choices and their consequences. You're supposed to put Joel's needs ahead of your pride. You're supposed to act like the mother and wife you claim to be. After Sophie left, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of the life I'd built with Julian. Family photos on the mantel, Joel's artwork on the refrigerator, the couch where Julian and I used to watch movies together before everything got so complicated. For the first time since this whole thing started, I let myself really think about Julian's face when I'd made that joke. The way he'd gone completely still, the hurt in his eyes, the way he'd quietly left his own home rather than cause a scene. I thought about all the times over the years when I'd dismissed his feelings, made light of his concerns, treated his emotional needs like they were inconvenient or excessive. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't about Julian being too sensitive. Maybe this was about me being too cruel. The family court building was imposing and formal, all marble and wood paneling that made me feel like I was walking into judgment. Julian was already there with his attorney when Rebecca and I arrived, looking composed and professional in his navy suit. He glanced at me once, briefly, then looked away. Martha was sitting in the gallery behind Julian, her face a mask of controlled anger. My mother sat alone on my side of the courtroom, looking sad and tired. Judge Patricia Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who reviewed our case files with methodical precision. When she looked up at us, I felt like she could see right through every excuse and justification I'd prepared. "This is a dissolution of marriage with contested custody," Judge Morrison said. "I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Mr. Klein, you may present your client's case." Julian's attorney stood and laid out the evidence with devastating precision. The video from the dinner party, showing my joke and Julian's reaction, screenshots of the group chat messages where I'd mocked his masculinity and bragged about Elliot, bank statements showing charges for dinners on nights I'd claimed to be working late, witness statements from party guests describing my behavior as cruel and humiliating. Your Honor, Mr. Hartwell endured years of public and private humiliation while attempting to preserve his marriage and protect his son from conflict. The respondent showed a pattern of emotional cruelty, infidelity, and complete disregard for her family's well-being. When it was Rebecca's turn, she did her best to minimize the damage. She argued that I was a devoted mother, that my marriage problems didn't affect my parenting, that Julian was being vindictive. But when Judge Morrison asked me to speak on my own behalf, I found myself stumbling over words that sounded hollow even to me. Your Honor, I never meant to hurt anyone. I was just frustrated with my marriage, and I made some poor choices. But I love my son, and I've been a good mother to him. Ms. Hartwell, Judge Morrison said, do you believe your behavior toward your husband was appropriate? I felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. This was my chance to show remorse, to take responsibility, to maybe salvage something from this wreckage. I think Julian overreacted to what was meant to be harmless teasing between spouses. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath behind me. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, and I realized I'd just sealed my fate. Judge Morrison's expression hardened. Ms. Hartwell, I've reviewed extensive evidence of your public humiliation of your husband, your extramarital affair, and your complete lack of accountability for the harm you've caused. Your continued insistence that your behavior was harmless demonstrates a concerning lack of judgment and empathy. She shuffled through the papers in front of her. In matters of child custody, the court's primary concern is the best interests of the minor child. A parent who shows a pattern of cruelty toward their spouse, who engages in deceptive behavior, and who refuses to acknowledge the impact of their actions on their family, is not demonstrating the kind of judgment and character that serves a child's best interests. My hands were shaking as Judge Morrison continued. Therefore, the court awards primary physical custody of the minor child to Mr. Hartwell, with supervised visitation for Ms. Hartwell until such time as she demonstrates meaningful accountability for her actions and completes court-mandated counseling. The words hit me like a physical blow. Supervised visitation. I looked over at Julian, expecting to see triumph or satisfaction, but his face showed only sadness and resignation. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, given Ms. Hartwell's financial infidelity and the emotional harm caused to Mr. Hartwell, the court awards him 60% of the marital assets and primary residence. I felt like I was drowning. Everything I'd built, everything I'd taken for granted was being stripped away because of what? A few jokes? Some private messages between friends? An innocent friendship that had gotten slightly out of hand? As we filed out of the courtroom, I watched Julian embrace his mother, watched them walk away together with dignity and purpose. My mother approached me hesitantly, her eyes red with unshed tears. "Leo, honey." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't say I told you so. Don't tell me this is what I deserved. Don't tell me I brought this on myself." Sophie looked at me with a mixture of love and disappointment that cut deeper than any judge's ruling. I was going to say that it's not too late to learn from this. It's not too late to become the person Joel needs you to be. But I wasn't ready to hear that. I wasn't ready to admit that maybe, just maybe, everyone else had been right and I had been wrong. I wasn't ready to face the possibility that my harmless joke had been the final cruelty in a long pattern of cruelties, that my affair had been a betrayal that destroyed my family, that my refusal to take responsibility had cost me everything I claimed to care about. Instead, I walked out of that courthouse alone, clutching the custody papers that would allow me to see my son for 4 hours every Saturday under the supervision of a court-appointed monitor. I drove home to the small apartment I'd have to find with my reduced share of our assets, to a life stripped of the marriage, friendships, and family connections I'd taken for granted. And even then, sitting in my car in the courthouse parking lot, watching Julian drive away with the life I'd lost, I told myself that everyone else was wrong, that Julian was too sensitive, that my friends had betrayed me, that the judge didn't understand the whole story. Because admitting the truth, that I had destroyed my own life through a pattern of cruelty and selfishness that I'd convinced myself was harmless, was still too painful to bear. It would be months before I could look at those custody papers and finally understand that the woman who had mocked her husband's masculinity for a laugh, who had bragged about her affair to mutual friends, who had refused to show genuine remorse even when faced with losing everything, was not the victim in this story. But that realization would come later, in the quiet of supervised visits with my son, in the loneliness of a life stripped of the relationships I'd poisoned with my own toxicity. For now, I could only sit in my car and wonder how one harmless comment had cost me everything, still not understanding that it had never been about one comment at all. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.